Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Chatterjee, and on behalf of the boards of Public Citizen, I'd like to welcome each of you to tonight's soiree. It's my pleasure as well to introduce our co-presidents and the MCs of tonight's event, Rob Weissman and Lisa Gilbert. It has been almost a year since Public Citizen moved to co-leadership. As you all know, Rob has led Public Citizen team as president for many years, and Lisa has been a stalwart leader within the organization for nearly as long. Now, Lisa and Rob are working together to lead in a time when norms are being shattered left and right. It's not under exaggeration. Indeed, today, we are all being asked to dig deep and work more innovatively. And we are lucky to have a bold, thoughtful, and committed staff of Public Citizen, and fortunate to have them led today by these two leaders. So please join me in welcoming Lisa and Rob to the stage.
Thanks so much, Emily, and welcome everyone. We are so thrilled to be here with all of you tonight. As Emily said, I'm Lisa Gilbert, co-president of Public Citizen, up here with Robert Weissman, also co-president. We are so proud of our partnership and of the incredible work of the entire team of Public Citizen throughout this year. You know, I've really been looking forward to tonight. It just feels so important to be in community right now, to be together with people who are in the fight. Because as you all know, our work is needed in a dramatically different way than it has been for many years before. We're roughly 5 months into Donald Trump's second term, and I know I don't have to tell anyone here that it has been a stunningly damaging period for the American people. We've seen untold attacks on our democracy, on our economy, on the judiciary, on our health, on the planet, on our standing in the global ecosystem, and honestly, on our collective national psyche. It's been traumatic to watch the fearfulness in some core American institutions and the stressors that are being brought to bear on our system of governance as the federal workforce is threatened, as deep cuts to services are occurring, and as DOGE runs rampant in our government. They've been throwing everything at us all at once to try to destabilize, and we've been having to deal with it, but the good news is that we have the right tools to fight back, and at Public Citizen, we have been doing just that. We are fighting back. We're fighting back in the courts. We're fighting back in the streets. We're fighting with hard-hitting research, with outreach to the media, with strong coalitions, and with a clear vision for what we want this country to look like on the other side of this national nightmare. So far, we've filed 15 lawsuits against the Trump administration. Including the very first one out of the gates. Within minutes of Trump taking office, we filed a lawsuit to push on the structure of DOGE. Since then, we've filed suits to protect all of our privacy by stopping Trump's agencies from illegally sharing our information with DOGE. We've filed suits to reverse the unlawful deletion of critical health information from government websites. We've filed suits to fight the illegal dismantling of entire agencies like the CFPB and USAID. And we filed a suit to fight the illegal funding freeze of foreign assistance. And that's just a few of them. Really, we're just getting started, as our incredible litigation team is constantly working to think of creative cases to take on the utter lawlessness of this administration. Beyond litigation, we're using all the other tools we have to fight the corruption, horrifying policy choices, and overall slide into authoritarianism that we are seeing, advocating on Capitol Hill, to the media, and doing extensive research. And of course, one particular target for us has been DOGE. They claim to be about efficiency, but in reality, they are a major villain and the face of many of the facets of the administration's lawlessness, conflicts of interest, and illegal activity. Elon Musk, until very recently, last week, at the helm of Doge, has been an epicenter of corporate-moneyed tech bro corruption. Our great researchers uncovered that Musk has a conflict at more than 70% of the agencies that Doge has targeted. So we simply cannot let the administration and Doge claim that they have some path to efficiency and better governance, when really what they are doing is wreaking havoc. So we're pointing this out everywhere we can. We've documented and exposed to the media the way the administration has already halted enforcement investigations at over 100 companies. We've released important research exposing Trump waging war against working people in America and around the globe by their misuse of tariffs. And we've been diving deep into their corruption, publishing a tracker of Trump's appointees and looking closely at Trump himself with his ongoing schemes to profit off the presidency. His newest and most blatant grift is, of course, his push for people to purchase his meme coin. So 2 weeks ago, Public Citizen held a protest outside of Trump's golf course in Virginia to highlight how anonymous purchasers of the meme, including foreign actors, can, in essence, just stuff cash right into the president's pockets. The list of our exposés, our research, our advocacy, our pushback goes on and on. You know, we understand that we are in a burgeoning constitutional crisis, and we're doing everything we can to fight back, including mobilizing people at scale. For example, with great partners, we helped organize the hands-off rallies in early April. I bet many of you were there. They drew 3.5 million people to 1,300 events around the country. We firmly believe that demonstrations like these will inspire more and more people to fight back. And so we'll continue to organize, to energize our base, and to build support for the work ahead. Although the beginning of Trump's second term has been, frankly, terrifying in its intensity, what we are doing, the work Public Citizen is doing to move people into action, that's what gives me hope. The pushback can and is working. And at Public Citizen, we promise that we will continue to use every tool we have to fight the good fight until we win. So... So, with that commitment, I want to hand it to my incredible co-president, Robert Weissman, to share his perspective on the moment.
Thank you, Lisa. If you're wondering about how the co-presidency is going, this thing that we're doing, we are a stronger organization for sharing the presidency. That's the answer of how we're doing. It's also fun. So we super appreciate all of you joining us here tonight. We're going to highlight a few people who are here along the way. Right now, I wanted to thank Senator Sheldon Whitehouse for joining us. My friend and predecessor and board member and gadfly and troublemaker, Joan Claybrook. No. We're not thanking Joan. No. You messed up the line. My friend, Joan Claybrook, wanted me to read a formal bio about Senator Whitehouse. And I don't want to read a formal bio about his subcommittee, which has a lot of names in it. It's a really long subcommittee. But what I do want to say is that we have amidst us a champion for justice and democracy and averting climate chaos, and he brings the kind of passion and fury that the moment demands and we wish there was more of. And Joan is good too. So this is not a crowd that needs to be told how bad things are with Donald Trump. One thing that is not getting enough attention, that is really, really serious and a fundamental assault on our democracy, is what they are unfolding and unrolling to try to destroy the nation's labor movement. So what I want to do right now is ask you to appreciate the staff who are here serving us from Unite Here, Local 25. That we appreciate what they're doing, and we appreciate that they are unionized, and we intend to fight to make sure everyone has that right. So we are doing all of the things that Lisa said, and we're doing more to deal with the Trump authoritarian moment. But one thing we also know is that the answer to Trump can't just be negative Trump. It can't just be not Trump. Because the not Trump world, that's what gave us Trump. And it's what gave us Trump a second time. So there has to be an affirmative agenda. So when we're fighting this horrific and cruel so-called budget reconciliation package, which is a tax and budget package, that will cost tens of thousands of lives if adopted on the way to transferring trillions of dollars to the rich and super corporations. When we're fighting that, it's not just, hey, let's protect Medicaid, it's let's expand health care to cover everyone in the country. When we're fighting against tax cuts for the rich, it's not just, how about no tax cuts for the rich? It's about how about fair share taxation on the rich? And when it's don't roll back the modest measures of the Inflation Reduction Act to address climate change, it's don't roll it back and let's invest more to deal with the climate catastrophe facing us. And that's the other part of the daily work that we public citizen are doing. That's the other part. So we try to not do only anti-Trump, but also do what we should be doing in a sane world. So, which is to pose grand ideas and push for big ideas, knowing we may not get it all the way, but that we'll get something. So we want to hold the fossil fuel executives and the oil companies responsible for the crimes they have committed. And we've got an innovative program to see if we can charge them with homicide for what they've done. And it's not just about protecting health care, it's winning Medicare for all, which we should have done 50 years ago. And it's making sure that we take on Big Pharma's monopoly pricing, so we're not just tinkering on the margins, but lowering prices so that everyone can afford the medicines they need. It's not just calling out a preposterous made by AI trade policy. It was, by the way, that's how they did it. It's talking about remaking trade policy to serve human beings instead of multinational corporations. It's about taking on these AI companies who want to control literally every single element of our lives, including what we're allowed to think, how we pay, who we hang out with, and saying, you don't get to have that kind of control over our society. And it is ultimately about working for a functioning democracy, not just with small changes, but with grand changes. We almost got across the finish line in the last Congress with the For the People Act, H.R. 1, which would have been transformative change. We're going to keep pushing on that and for more, for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, to deal with gerrymandering, to make sure voting rights are restored, and to make sure we have a functioning democracy in this country. We're gonna honor three great Americans tonight, and we're gonna hear from two of them who know about fighting this fight right now, but also doing grand and big things as well. So very excited to have them with us. Thank you all for joining us. Back to you, Lisa.
One thing about the co-presidents, we're very different heights. So I now have the distinct honor of introducing Senator Jeff Merkley. Senator Merkley has been in the Senate since 2008, and he has an incredible record as a progressive champion. He's led efforts to protect consumers, to fix our banking system, to fight big money in politics, to fix the Senate rules, to pass democracy reform legislation, and so much more. Senator Merkley is truly collaborative. When I was thinking about what to say tonight, I thought, why is he the perfect keynote for Public Citizens Gala? I thought about how effortlessly inclusive he is. He constantly creates moments to directly solicit opinions from movement leaders and those who are in touch with the grassroots base. He wants to get feedback on what he and his fellow senators are pushing, always trying to understand what will resonate and what constituents around the country really want. This outreach speaks to his ethos and this very deliberate way that he approaches being a senator. Senator Merkley is also a true reformer. As one of the lead sponsors of the bill Rob was just talking about, the Priority Reform Bills on Democracy, H.R. 1, we worked closely with him on substance, organizing, and strategy. He recognized very early on the need to alter the rules of the Senate to win democracy reform, and he thought through the policy changes needed to do that. He even wrote a book on it. He personally met with almost every other senator to try and make these changes reality. He was a crusader, and as you know, we came within a breath of reforming the filibuster and passing transformative democracy reform with his leadership. Senator Merkley is on the front lines as a senator. Just last month, he joined us at that protest at Trump's National Golf Course, yelling with us about the disgusting corruption. Yep. The senator spoke so passionately in the rain with us that day that he lost his voice. Finally, Senator Merkley is a fighter, and he is a fighter who knows how to get the wonky, important stuff done. Before his current assignments, he was a longtime member of the Banking Committee, and we worked closely with him in the wake of the crash on the Wall Street Reform Bill. When the nation was still reeling, he managed to insert policy that the banking industry was fighting tooth and nail, banning high-risk trading inside commercial banks and lending institutions, which is, of course, one of the core causes of the crash. So, summing him up, Senator Merkley, effortlessly collaborative, a true reformer, on the front lines, and a fighter for the nerdy stuff that matters. He's our champion. He's a close public citizen friend and a senator that the people of this nation can count on to get things done. So I am proud, honored, excited to invite up Senator Merkley to give our keynote address.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Robert, and congratulations in advance to Rohit Chopra for your superb work at CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, your work at the Federal Trade Commission, your fight for the people against the powerful. It is a pleasure to come and talk to you all tonight. Because you are in this fight. I appreciate that Lisa laid it out, that we're fighting back. Because, you know, the kind of the vibe I bring to politics is first, yes, as a policy nerd, but that you have to storm the castle. You have to be in the fight. I was asked at a gathering for the TRIO programs, which are the programs that help facilitate blue-collar kids find a pathway into college. A student stood up and said, "Hey, do you have a mantra?" I thought, a mantra? I said, "No, but I have a slogan, and it's never stop fighting to build a better world." And I think that's very much public citizens' perspective as well. Thank you for taking on the reconciliation bill. You know, Trump calls it the big, beautiful bill. We call it the big, beautiful betrayal. It is a betrayal because Trump campaigned that he's going to fight for families, but in fact, what does this bill do? This bill is families lose and billionaires win. It's going to cut health care for millions of families to fund tax breaks for the richest Americans. It's going to have millions of children going hungry to fund tax breaks for billionaires. So we have a better idea that I think you all will connect with, which is not families lose and billionaires win, but families thrive and billionaires pay their fair share. But tonight, given that I was out on the protest line with you all a week ago Thursday, I want to talk a little bit about corruption. Because we are in a period of open government corruption that few of us could ever have anticipated occurring here in the United States of America. Maybe some small country somewhere far away with an authoritarian dictator who's taken a slice of every contract, but not here in the United States of America. But what do we have? Well, we have a government for sale sign planted on the White House lawn. And that's exactly what the meme coin, the Trump meme coin, is all about. That is a deal like this. Trump says, open your wallet and give me your money, and I will send you an email with a picture of a coin on it with my face. What a deal. You know, instead of bags of cash under the table to gain access and influence, it's being done right in the open. And it's extraordinary. And we don't have to guess about what people are doing. I mean, he had that dinner with 220 folks that you all were organizing the protest about. And they collectively paid some $145-ish million for those 220 seats. Does anyone think they paid $220 million to get a digital picture and sent to them by email? No, they were buying access. They were buying influence. And we know that this is true also because folks who are buying those coins were telling us so. Javier Selgas, the CEO of Freight Technologies, he said, hey, we bought $2 million of the Trump meme coin, and we're going to try to buy $20 million. And we don't know how many they actually bought because it's not transparent, right? There's no transparency, and that's one of the points that you all were making in your protest is like the American people should know every single person who went to that dinner, every person buying a meme coin, what are they paying to gain this access and influence so we can have a public conversation about it, but we don't know. But the CEO of Freight Technologies, Inc. said, well, we did buy $2 million, and we're wanting to buy $20 million of these coins. And why? Because we want the Trump administration to change their trade policy regarding freight between Mexico and the United States. He just shared exactly what it was all about. But you were out there saying at that demonstration, hell no. And I think we need a lot more hell no across this country as we take on the Trump administration. I was asked a few minutes ago if I'm optimistic. And the answer is actually, yes, I am. And here's why. Because of the type of energy that's coming together through folks like yourselves. I mean, the amount of phone calls I'm getting, I get a chart each day showing the phone calls, and the blue bars are on issues that share my point of view, and the red bars are folks who oppose what I'm doing or fighting for. And it's like 98% is these bars are blue. It was the opposite in 2009, 2010 when the Tea Party was activated. I was getting red charts every single day, massive number of Oregonians saying, you're doing the wrong thing, fighting for health care. With Obamacare, but now who's activated? The Tea Party is staying home. Citizens are standing up. Citizens are joining affinity groups like yourself and saying, let's make a difference. Because in a republic, a president is accountable to the Constitution, and we're going to hold him accountable. And that is why I love Public Citizens litigating for Trump accountability campaign. Absolutely. And all these lawsuits that Lisa was talking about. So I'm going to share a little bit about this strategy and why it's so important. It's an extraordinary moment. Think about Trump versus the United States case. Now, I'm not a lawyer like my good friend who is really our constitutional expert. So if I get this wrong, please forgive me. I so much love hearing Sheldon Whitehouse talk about the Constitution. We need like 9 Sheldon Whitehouses on the Supreme Court of the United States. But as a non-lawyer, then I'll be forgiven if I get the facts of law wrong. But this was my impression of Trump versus the United States. The Supreme Court said, you know, it's such a burden for the president to be worried about breaking the law when he's making decisions. So we will simply find some invisible ink in the Constitution that says the president is above the law, that as long as there's an act of government, he can't break the law. Are you kidding me? How do originalists, or so-called originalists, on the court who know that the founders were extraordinarily concerned about a president trying to become a king, a president trying to become an authoritarian dictator. They're so concerned about it, they put the emoluments clause in the Constitution to make sure that people weren't bribed so that our government would not be up for sale and presidents wouldn't be up for sale, and they would be a president with checks and balances and separations of powers. Well, how is it possible those justices suddenly found that a president is above the law? Now, you take and combine that decision with pardon power, and you have an extraordinary confluence of events. Because here's a president who says, well, I'm above the law, and you know what, everyone who works for me, if you're worried, look what I did. I pardoned everyone who is loyal to me. So don't worry. And now we have a whole executive branch that considers itself above the law. Well, I haven't found that invisible ink in the Constitution that the Supreme Court found, but I'm hoping the Supreme Court members, as they see how this is unfolding, will have a very different view as many of these other cases, many of which you all are initiating, find their way up from district to circuit to the Supreme Court. And can we therefore have a Supreme Court that really honors the checks and balances of our Constitution? So, Trump is executing a 5-point or 5-strategy assault on our republic. Now, it isn't because he crafted this, but it is because there's a man behind the curtains named Russell Vought, who is head of OMB. Russell Vought, an architect of Project 2025. Russell Vought, who has a view that the president and the executive branch are not accountable, doesn't believe in the checks and balances of our Constitution. And so I wanted to do a little bit to review that. We've watched governments around the world slide from being a republic into being a strongman authoritarian state. It happens with a subservient Congress. It happens with a deferential court. But it's happening here right now. And that's why I say to folks, don't talk about there being a constitutional crisis down the road or a constitutional crisis around the bend, because we are in the middle one right now, and that's why the fight right now is so important. The first strategy that Russell Vought, through President Trump, is executing is to exempt the executive branch from the rule of law. Trump illegally fired Mr. Chopra from the CFPB. He fired 17 inspector generals illegally because the law says there has to be for cause, there has to be 30 days notice to Congress, and he did neither. And as Mr. Vought told me before we held a hearing on him in the Budget Committee, he said, I don't believe that we have to follow any of those laws. And that's exactly what he's doing. Members of the NLRB, members of the Federal Trade Commission. He says there's no such thing as an independent agency. The word independent agency should be struck from their vocabulary. It doesn't belong. It's not part of their vision of the executive branch. Trump violated the Anti-Deficiency Act with his fork in the road email. He violated the Privacy Act when DOJ accessed sensitive personal information at the Social Security Administration and the IRS. How many of us want the federal government accessing and compiling and grabbing all of our personal information, compiling and handing it bunched to 19 to 20-year-old DOJ members to do with what they will? Not a good vision. But public citizens lawyers are launching lawsuits because the president is accountable in a republic to the Constitution. Thank you, public citizen. Trump's second strategy is to steal the power of the purse. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled on this twice. They ruled on it when they said, hey, President Nixon, you can't impound the money for the Environmental Protection Agency. They ruled on it again when Congress in 1996 decided to give the president an item line veto and said, no, you can't do that. But Mr. Vought says, yes, we can. that the law about spending is only a suggestion. We can hold on to any funds we want. We can impound any funds we want. And he said, I'm looking forward to the fact that we will impound funds, and then those law cases will go to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court will give us a unitary executive and give the president this power. That's what he told me. Well, you know what? Hell no. Hell no. I am placing a lot of faith that the Supreme Court will, in fact, find no more invisible ink, because that is a real concern. So many agencies, as mentioned, have been defunded. And just think about USAID. Already, Boston Public Health, that worked on a model with other public health agencies, estimates that just from the time that 80% of those programs were shut down by Elon Musk and by Marco Rubio, already 100,000 people have died around the world. What a tragedy. One weekend of feeding a program into the wood chipper illegally in violation of the separation of powers, and 100,000 people. Why? Because malnutrition programs were ended, because malaria and dysentery programs were ended, because AID programs were ended. One of the estimates that came out of the group study was that we would see 15 million deaths from AIDS alone over the next 15 years, and it would produce 14 million orphans. That's a type of consequence of this incredibly irresponsible and unconstitutional dismantlement of agencies and seizure of funds. We have to claim back our republic and end that. A third violation or a third strategy is to disregard due process. Just two examples. Marco Rubio stripping visas from students using a 1952 Red Scare law that he felt gives that power to the Secretary of State. And deportations under a 1798 law that was supposed to be used if we were invaded, and then the ability to send people abroad. Well, this lack of, due process is the guarantor of our freedom. It may sound like a fancy legal term to many Americans, but it is what keeps the government from seizing us off the street, and we have to be in the fight for due process. And I'm so glad that Public Citizen is in that fight with lawsuits saying that in a republic, a president is accountable to the Constitution. A fourth strategy is to stiff-arm the courts. Ignoring a federal judge's order to deport Venezuelan immigrants to El Salvador, not keeping the plane on the ground, not turning it around if it was in the air, ignoring a 9-0 Supreme Court decision. Who could imagine that that's happening here in the United States of America? Stiff-arming the courts, that is an extraordinary challenge and part of this constitutional crisis. And then a fifth strategy of attacking other sources of power, like the free press, like universities, like law firms. Suing newspapers, producing really a challenge and trying to intimidate them, and groups like ABC and CBS bending the knee. Columbia University bending the knee, but Harvard University standing up. Thank you, Harvard University. Attacking law firms by stripping security clearances from their lawyers, trying to prevent them from being able to take on serious cases. Some law firms were accommodating to what the president wanted, but others are standing up. And you know what? We need less accommodation, and we need a lot more standing up and fighting against this tyranny. And Public Citizen is at the middle of it, because in a republic, a president is accountable to the Constitution. So people say, I go and do a town hall in every county every year. I held 36 in 36 counties this year. And one of the reasons I'm so optimistic is people coming out to my town halls in red, super red counties in Oregon. Normally they'd come out and they want to tear my heart out. I walked into these conservative counties and people stood up and started cheering and like, where am I? And I don't know, it's just like extraordinary experience. But last year, in a campaign year, I had somewhere around 3,500 people attend my town halls, about an average of 100 people at a town hall. Okay, not huge numbers. I'm not Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. Okay, fine. And it's back in my home turf where people see me every year. But this year, at my town halls, 15,000 people came out in person. And at every town hall, all 36 times, someone said, "What can we do?" And I say, first, get off the couch. You can't save the country if you're curled up in a fetal position. And of course, all of you are off the couch. I said, second, fiercely hold your government electeds accountable. Hold them accountable, which is exactly what Public Citizen is doing. And third, join an affinity group, because being angry and frustrated alone is to be depressed, and to be angry and frustrated in partnership with others, like through an organization like Public Citizen, is to be energized and effective. Public Citizen is in the fight every single day, challenging Trump's corruption, challenging his attack on the checks and balances of our nation. When Ben Franklin was leaving the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Mr. Franklin, what kind of government do we have?" And he said, "A republic, if we can keep it." Let's keep it. Thank you, Public Citizen.
Let's hear it again for Senator Merkley. So now we'd like to show a brief video highlighting some of our work and successes from this year, including our increased media footprint.
Lisa Gilbert of Public Citizen.
At Public Citizen, our mission is to take on corporate power, to fight corruption, and it is way past time to end Trump's crypto corruption.
When you're asking working families to pay higher electric rates so that more infrastructure can be built to serve billionaire-controlled tech companies, that's a problem.
Public Citizen.
Public Citizen.
Public Citizen.
Public Citizen.
According to Public Citizen, $50 million of those dollars came from businesses that are currently under investigation or facing federal enforcement.
Taking on the CFPB just shows where they stand. It's consumers on one side, it's corporations on the other. They're choosing corporations and they're choosing corruption.
They allege that DOJ doesn't comply with the Federal Advisory Committee Act.
What we know they're trying to do is advance a very specific ideological agenda that will serve the interests of corporations. They say so. They want to cut the regulatory protections that give us clean air, clean food, safe workplaces, economic justice.
Would like to see traditional Medicare strengthened so that there will be a level playing field. Medicare Advantage often overcharges the federal government, and making it even more lucrative for private insurers is not the way to go.
Attempted purge at USAID is one of many moves by the Trump administration. In response, the nonprofit advocacy group Public Citizens has filed multiple lawsuits to challenge Trump and Elon Musk's efforts to reshape our government.
What's stunning here is the extent of the executive branch's failure to comply with a clear court order.
There's still a lot of risk that this data could end up being shared, and we think that's contrary to law.
And the executive can't pick and choose which laws it wants to follow and which laws it doesn't. We don't live underneath a king. The executive has to comply.
Donald Trump issued dozens of executive orders that are going to be horrible for the American people. Here's a laundry list of some of the worst ones.
There's only one thing that's enough to face down this authoritarian moment. And that is this movement here today. That is us here, more than 100,000 of us here right now, more than 1 million of us across the country. More people watching online, people who can't join because they're scared. joining together.
Public Citizen, one of the great nonprofits in this country.
First of all, how about a little appreciation for Public Citizen helping to organize?
And so the first step that had to be taken to start a resistance was to tear down that wall of fear. We'll keep fighting like hell. We need activism and politics as well as law to fight back.
America is not for sale!
We've got to stop this corruption of Donald Trump and the core corruption that is at the heart of the Republican agenda against the United States of America and its people.
Pam Bondi has numerous troubling potential conflicts of interest from her time as a lobbyist, which call into question her ability to hold corporate wrongdoers accountable.
There are institutions like the Heritage Foundation. They don't want all of us to vote.
We are not going to let them. They are going to be defeated.
So at Public Citizen, we issue a lot of press releases. We send out a lot of fundraising emails, as a few of you may know. We do a lot of reports. We do testimony. We write briefs. We don't have a history of issuing proclamations. Tonight, we're issuing a proclamation. I told you that we were going to honor 3 great Americans. First was Jeff Merkley. We're going to get to Rohit Chopra later. Right now, I want to talk about Aileen Walsh. If you don't want to stand, can you wave your cane so people can see you? "32 years ago, in the year 1993, Ms. Aileen Walsh joined the team at Public Citizen. Later this year, she has announced she will retire. In her more than 3 decades of service at Public Citizen, Ms. Walsh has assisted 2 Public Citizen presidents of, shall we say, different temperaments in every aspect of their job, as well as 2 co-presidents. She has served as an ambassador for Public Citizen, from the everyday people who come into contact with the organization to the high and mighty, like the fancy senators at this dinner. She's done that with equal parts charm and grit. She has maintained personal connections across generations of Public Citizen staff, keeping alumni linked to the organization long before and more effective than LinkedIn. She has greeted new staff with good cheer and a bit of devilishness, helping create and lift the organizational esprit de corps. She has served a rambunctious and disorderly board of directors. That's not true? That's pretty true. She has maintained the formal records of the Public Citizen organizations. She has attended not just to her job duties, but to the well-being of the organization in whatever form that requires and whatever it means at any moment. She has justified and worn proudly her self-proclaimed title of Queen of Public Citizen. Which and whom we do hereby honor today. We do not have a crown for Rohit Chopra. Something else. So as you've already heard, Rohit was the most recent director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I wish I could say, as a form of praise, that he was fired by Donald Trump, because he was fired by Donald Trump. Unfortunately and tragically, that's true for tens of thousands of people right now, and it's not a joke. But I can point instead to the fact that his ouster was greeted by an editorial in the Wall Street Journal, which was very pleased. Their editorial was titled, "Rohit Chopra is ousted at last." They had noted in one of their many editorials about Rohit, the list of Mr. Chopra's regulatory assaults on business is long. They worried that Mr. Chopra was issuing new regulations willy-nilly in the days before Mr. Trump took power, which is true. He was putting out a lot of rules willy-nilly. So as head of the CFPB, Rohit issued rules, and his team, that would deal with bank overdraft fees, consumers' access to financial data so we can switch banks if we want to without having to go through too many headaches, gave us a right to dispute unfair charges, cracked down on credit card ripoff fees, imposed important restrictions on using medical debt on our credit record. You should cheer for that. And if he had just done that, he almost assuredly would have gone down in history as one of the greatest consumer regulators in the modern period. But that's not all that Rohit did. He was concerned more fundamentally about the problem of corporate power, whether that was banking power or big tech power, and how it was distorting our democracy and undermining consumers from more angles than we can keep track of, but he did. So he was focused not just on the things I said, but also on banking concentration. And he was the first, so far as I know, regulator in memory to focus on the problem of corporations that violate the law again and again and say, hey, if you're a repeat offender, maybe you should be held accountable the second time. The Trump administration, by the way, Trump administration approach is to say, the second time we'll give you a lighter penalty than we did the first time. He focused on the great emerging problem we're facing in the corporate sector, which is big tech concentration and big tech entering everything. He's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So big tech is coming into the payment space. We have to be on top of the problem of big technology companies. So he brought to the job not just that first set of things, which is to say, I'm going to be the best consumer financial regulator that you could imagine in a sort of straight way. He said, let's step back. Let's think about what are the challenges we face as consumers and not just be narrowly confined. Let's think expansively and creatively and innovatively and aggressively, and let's just do what needs to be done. Let's actually have a government that thinks about how the financial sector should serve consumers instead of consumers serving the financial sector or being served to the financial sector. And I think that, well, I'll just say this. There have been some amazing regulators in the last 50 years, some of whom are in this room. But there is no one who has been a better consumer champion for the American people in the last 50 years than Rohit Chopra. And that's no small thing. And equally important as that thing, I think, is that Rohit showed us that the government can actually work. So when I say we have to not just go back to negative Trump, right? We can't just go back to the status quo. Rohit Chopra was showing a different way forward, what it means for the government to work for everyday people. And that is a lesson that will last and persist no matter what they do to the agency. And it's a message and a lesson that you're proselytizing, but we all have to take and proselytize to carry forward what Rohit did for all of us, so that the world and the country and the world know that government can work, that we can take on big corporations and win, that the power of government can discipline corporate wrongdoing, and that if you get someone in these jobs who's serious and who cares and is fearless and who takes pride in negative Wall Street Journal editorials instead of backing away from them, you can make a world of difference. Thank you, Rohit. So, some years ago, we created an award, the Golden Boot Award. Golden Boot for those who kick corporate butt. And there ain't nobody more deserving of this award than my friend and our friend, Rohit Chopra.
Do I have to hold this the whole time? Okay. Well, thank you, Rob, Lisa, the whole board. I don't know how to address you now, Your Majesty. Senator Merkley, Senator Whitehouse, and really all the people who have been part of really changing things. A lot of them are sitting on the mezzanine up there, and give them a round of applause. So in every single role I've been in, public citizen has been there. Student loans, drug prices, privacy, antitrust, Wall Street, global trade, and more. On the big fights, you've been the one there. I was told to ask, I was asked to speak a little bit about, tell us what the roadmap is going forward. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I thought I might share a little bit about what do we do when our government and our agencies go astray. What happens when they're not there, and what do we do to bring them back? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about an agency called the Federal Trade Commission. Over its 100-year history, the FTC had a storied legacy, shaped actually by many of you, of taking on illegal activity from some of the most powerful and biggest firms in America. The papers in the FTC archives revealed many of the big confrontations, from big tobacco, big poultry, and so much more. But in 2018, when I was confirmed to go to the FTC, it was clear that that history was ancient history. The FTC had fallen into a deep decay and disarray over decades. There were some short spurts of hope over those moments, but the agency had really lost its credibility, and many of us thought it was a dead fish. The actions by the commissioners and the top leadership spanning multiple administrations revealed the disdain for people, the disdain for the rule of law, and the disdain for public service. Commissioners had decided to stop enforcing laws on the books, telling Congress whatever. They had bent the knee, as someone mentioned earlier, to those with money and those with clout. And Congress, people would routinely pass laws to tell the FTC you have new powers to stop systemic abuses. One example, after the passage of NAFTA, Congress threw a bone to consumer advocates and said, let's give the FTC new powers to penalize and prosecute Made in USA fraud. That's when companies stick on a Made in USA label for the goods made abroad. And the agency was authorized to create a rule, penalize the offenders, but the commissioners did nothing, and instead routinely gave a free pass to firms that lied about their labels. And rather than act on nationwide or systemic harms, opioids, for-profit schools, student loan abuses, unchecked commercial surveillance, subprime mortgages, the commissioners reached a bipartisan consensus to watch from the sidelines. The 2013 to 2018 period, those 5 years before I came, were especially damaging. Facially anti-competitive mega mergers just flew out of boardrooms and then greenlit by a Federal Trade Commission. The FTC's orders were being routinely violated, including by the likes of Facebook and Google. No action, no response by the agency. And to make matters worse, the commissioners weaponized the agency against small businesses, strong-arming them into settlements and trying to score cheap points. After the passage of the Affordable Care Act, the FTC was given more powers to safeguard health data. That's what tells us about whether we have a diagnosis, whether we're struggling with mental health. And guess how many enforcement actions they brought in the first 10 years? 0. Believe it or not, rather than confront the dangerous consolidation that creeped across the economy or the obvious fraud in so many sectors, you're not going to believe me on this, but you can look it up. The commission launched enforcement investigations against skating teachers, church organists, and family dry cleaners in its enforcement and regulatory work. But actually, here's what was funny. The commissioners were happy because after they left, they got to cash in on multi-million-dollar jobs working for those law firms surrendering to the president right now. And like many of you are feeling now, it would just feel easy right now to surrender. And rather than give up, though, in 2018, Public Citizen and all of us, we acted. We started to say no to the failed status quo. We started to lay a new vision, including for the era of artificial intelligence. And that summer in 2018, when I arrived, with the help of a young legal scholar who joined the FTC, we began to scour the FTC's archives to figure out how to bring the FTC back to life. We published an article that outlined how the FTC could resuscitate its power to crack down on unfair methods of competition, which the commissioners, on a bipartisan basis, basically deleted from the statute. The article got a lot of pushback, including, I think, from the Wall Street Journal editorial board. And we argued how to use the FTC's authorities to restrict the use of these terrible non-compete clauses imposed on workers across the economy. We voted against the cheap settlements that were giveaways to firms, including where companies purchased immunity provisions for their top executives in exchange for a headline settlement. That's what they did with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. We produced an abundance of new ideas to halt corporate power. And thanks to the analysis and advocacy of so many in this room, it worked. We brought a bipartisan antitrust complaint along with state attorneys general from nearly every state against the big tech companies. We rescinded policies from the Clinton and Obama eras that sabotaged the agency. We discontinued the cheap attacks on dry cleaners. We finalized a Made in USA rule more than 25 years after Congress authorized it. And more importantly, we revived law enforcement that was on the books, sitting in plain sight to ensure fair treatment in today's economy and tomorrow's. Oh, and guess what? The young legal scholar who came to join my office to write that article, her name is Lena Khan, and she became chair of the Federal Trade Commission. Lena Khan's FTC was like opposite day. Every single failure of the commission, she did the opposite. She stopped the mergers in the boardroom before they sailed through. She didn't just penalize companies, she changed the business model. And for those of you who are at Public Citizen, who have worked on the unbelievably exploitative costs of drug prices, finally the Federal Trade Commission was doing something about it. Lena Khan wasn't the first person to change the FTC. In 1968, another young lawyer recruited a group of people to essentially infiltrate the FTC and create a case for reform for an agency that had gone rogue and not working for all of us. That guy's name was Ralph Nader. And after he went to the FTC and with his team wrote a transformative report that changed the course of the FTC, he decided to set up an entity to form the basis of more reform for consumers, for workers, for everyone. And he called it Public Citizen. And Public Citizen was there to represent those without power. It was not to defend government for government's sake. It was supposed to equalize power for those who didn't have it against those who had lots of it. So people ask me right now, what do you feel? And I know a lot of you feel overwhelmed. I know a lot of you feel fatigued. And people at Public Citizen, as we've just learned, they're working more than 40-hour weeks. Many feel bruised, many feel beaten down. And usually the winner of this golden boot does some cheerleading. I don't know if we're in that moment to cheer, but we are in the moment to scheme. We are in the moment to strategize. We are in the moment to act, to speak, and to plan for what is new. So, we've already heard this mentioned. There is something different. It's not now just agencies being captured or not doing their job. We now have this outfit, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which I and others refer to as Doggy. And I want to just say, a couple things, which is that there are people who work with Doggy, and they say things like federal employees hate America. And so I don't want to say in detail their names here, but someone in this room actually worked at the CFPB and predecessor agencies for decades. And I just want to say to you, I don't want to say your name, I actually think you love America. I think you are people who want the country to be better. I think you could have made a lot of money working for somebody else. And I really hope you can all give a big applause to all of our public servants who have served all of us. So we heard from Rob. It is not enough to be anti. We are going to have to create a new playbook with new voices, new plans, new schemes. We should not defend the acronyms. I don't care if America knows what CFPB stands for. I want them to know that there is somebody there to prosecute the financial institution that cheats them. I don't really want everybody to memorize all of the bureaucracy. I want the agencies to work for them, not for the big companies. So let's think about tossing out the old playbook and writing a new one together. I know everyone in this room believes this, but I really think the normalized corruption is such a reminder to us. And I know you probably think that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is really just this guy with great hair. But we need to listen to him on how to stop the flow of corporate money in this town. We need to ban Congress from stock trading, and we need to stop the corporate influence machine. I think, and I'll wrap up, I know I'm over time. The last thing is that we need the courage to learn. We made mistakes too, all of us. People we supported entered into bad trade deals. They didn't always serve the public. People like me and others, we should be criticized for mistakes we made. And I hope that each of you will have the courage to learn from the mistakes we've had. And we cannot allow people to think that the answer to this is to accommodate more corporate power and to listen to their poll testing. And we need an abundance of power to stop them. So, I guess the answer is this. We need to get to work. We need to form our plans and schemes to really make sure that these agencies are not copy and paste from what was before. We will create something new as a team together, and we'll fight like hell to get it done. Thank you so much.
just a few more minutes, we're going to wrap up. We have the room till 9. We're going to be done before 9. You want to hang out? At 9, you got to get out and respect them. Let's clap for Rohit again. He's going to walk away, but let's. So I just want to quickly add 3 things for us to take home and to think about what we have to do in this time and at this moment. And before jumping into that, I just really want to thank you all for coming here and being part of Public Citizen. I think it's super important that we gather and actually gather in person, not just on Zoom. That we gather and connect and reinforce each other and have solidarity. And particularly at this time, strengthen each other at a time that's fearful for a lot of us. Wasn't one of my better lines, but all right. So 3 things I want to suggest, and then I got something to ask of you. So the first is, and building on what Rohit just said and all that wisdom, is that we have to be careful at this time not to permit the normalization of what Donald Trump is doing. Like, the bar for recognizing corruption now, it is literally 2 orders of magnitude higher, maybe 3, than it was in the first administration. We can't permit that, and we can't get used to it. It is not okay to pull people off the streets because of their political point of view, and we can't let that be normalized. And we're all susceptible to it. We're all susceptible to it, so we got to strengthen ourselves, and that's why being together is so important. The second thing I think is super important is that we have to cultivate hope. The authoritarian Trump wants to have us fearful and isolated and hopeless and giving up. And if we hold on to hope, not as a matter of faith, but out of belief that together we can make a difference, then we build the power to deal with this authoritarian moment. So the first thing is no normalization. And the second thing is hope. And the third thing is we have to bring in more people. And that doesn't necessarily mean, although it does also mean, bring over a moderate who should be opposed to Trump but is not yet there. It may mean someone who's completely against it but tuning out and bringing them in. When we have enough people on the streets, that's where we're going to defeat them. That's where we're going to defeat them. One of the cool things about Rohit is he's the one screaming out when we're talking. He's leading the cheers. Okay, and another thing we need to do is figure out ways to create community and solidarity, which is why one of the reasons I think this is so important. And so what I'd like you to do now is going to be uncomfortable for a few people in the room. But I'd like the litigators who work for Public Citizen to stand up. And be appreciated. So, thank you all. All keep standing. Don't sit down, Allison. All of us who work for Public Citizen are basking in the glow of what these people, the ones we could pull away from the computers tonight, are doing. And one of the reasons it's so important what they're doing, it's the substance of these cases, which is enormous and overwhelming. But it's also, she's sitting down, we'll make her stand up again in a second. But it's also because it's inspiring hope. And I think I know that better than they do because of the feedback that Lisa and I get. But these cases are making people, especially right out of the gate, and since then, make people think, yeah, there's something to do. And it's not the only thing to do. It's not the only thing to do, but it is a thing to do, and it's real, and it's concrete, and it's inspiring people, and it's making a difference. So thank you all. Keep up. And then I'd like to ask everybody else who works at Public Citizen, including the ones who just sat down, to stand up, including all you up there. And for appreciate, it's not just, we love and we're so passionate about the litigation, but everyone who's standing and a few who are still too embarrassed to do it are doing unbelievable work. And we appreciate you, and this room appreciates you. Okay, and then last, I want you all to stand up. Because, stand up, what are you doing? Stand up. You get our fundraising emails, most of you do. And we say in those fundraising emails that we, Public Citizen, is not just the staff. It's the project of Public Citizen. It's everyone who's connected to us, everyone who's on our email list, everyone who donates, everyone who volunteers, for sure everyone who works. So thank you all, and let's clap for all of us together. And then you're very humble. You don't like clapping for yourselves. But sometimes doing these hokey things about cheering and chanting together and stuff, it makes us come together and it feels some power together. So while you're standing, if you can stand it, if you have to sit, sit. I'd just like us to clap like this. Thank you all, and good night.